Hello, my name is Alexa, and my presentation is on predicting OCD severity through intrusive thoughts, anxiety, and fear. So to start off, this is what our data represents. And we can go on to talk about some of the assumptions, similarities, and differences between MRC and ANOVA. But first, MRC, basically among other things, the purpose of it is to have more predictor specification, and overall the purpose of ANOVA is to test variance. So some of their similarities would be their focus on variance and their similar assumptions, and we can see that MRC assumes that the mean error equals 0, and MRC also requires covariates, where ANOVA requires factors. However, as Gary Kang pointed out, either ANOVA, regression, or even difference of mean tests could all be appropriate because we have only one dichotomous independent variable, which, as we said, would be intrusive thoughts, because that would be a yes or no question: do you have them or not? So to start off with MRC, we can look for bivariate outliers in our data, and we can see that we do have some in the anxiety and fear plot, and also the intrusive thoughts and anxiety plot. However, we can see that once we run the analysis that we fail to reject the null hypothesis because p is greater than 0.05. However, we can see that x1 does have a significant influence on OCD severity, so that would be able to tell us that maybe intrusive thoughts heavily impact someone's OCD severity. Next, we can look at MRC diagnostics to assess homoscedasticity, and we can see that all of these look relatively normal, and we can see that there is normality in the QQ plot. However, we can see that 14 is consistently an outlier in this data. So 14 is likely a data point as opposed to a case outlier, as Cortina pointed out. And we could delete this data point, but we do have to be careful because deletion does help support our hypothesis, which is generally just not good practice, as Cortina also pointed out. So we do have to be careful about deleting this outlier. We can further look for homoscedasticity and check for heteroscedasticity, and we can see that there is a bit of a fan shape in this plot right here, so that may indicate heteroscedasticity. We can further look at Cook's distance, and we can see that 14 has a large influence on the data, but our variance inflation factors are all relatively low. We can further examine residuals, and we can see that they are pretty normally distributed in this histogram. However, of course, histograms do have pretty poor resolution at the tail, so this is more of a rough idea of how they're distributed, as Fox pointed out. Something to note here, though, is that the mean of our residuals is minus 1.7 when it should be 0, and this could indicate that there are some issues with our data and that it could be skewed. We can then go on to ANOVA, and we can see that for F1 we fail to reject the null hypothesis at the 0.05 level, and F2 we reject the null hypothesis at the 0.05 level. So this could tell us that anxiety does impact OCD severity in this case. However, what if intrusive thoughts affect an individual's anxiety level? So we can then look at the interaction between the two. And we can see here that F2 is significant at the 0.05 level. And we fail to reject our null hypothesis at the 0.05 level with the interaction. So next we can look at the ANOVA diagnostics, and we can look for homoscedasticity and check for heteroscedasticity, and we can see that everything looks normal here and that we can assume normality, no significant outliers. And finally, we can look at some box plots for ANOVA, and we can see that these are both normally distributed. The data is probably not skewed, this being a little bit skewed right here. And then this is interesting because there is no interquartile range, it's just the median. And that is definitely something that we would want to look into further if we were to analyze its data more, and that could indicate some issues. But these are my hand calculations, and that is all I have. Thank you.